Hello, my name is Mallory Jenna Robinson. Join me on A Hateful Homicide, a true crime podcast dedicated to telling the stories regarding the murders of transgender, gender non-binary, and gender diverse community members in the United States and abroad. This is A Hateful Homicide.
911, what's your emergency?
Yeah. A transgender woman has been shot and killed in North Baltimore. Alpha?
In the U.S., trans women of color have a life expectancy of just 35 years.
This happens on a daily. Another one of my friends got killed right up the street from here.
These cases are true. The victims are real, and their voices matter. This is A Hateful Homicide. The murder of Yoshi Tsuchida, the man with no face. Friday, November 13th, 2015, Tokyo, Japan. Warning, the following episode may contain audio evidence of misgendering. Listening discretion is advised.
頃から僕の話し方や身のこなしが他の男子と違うからとひどい暴力を振るわれていました。僕は僕であってはいけない。誰かのふりをしなくてはいけないなんだとずっとそう思っていたんです。3歳ぐらいからもう自分はゲイだってことを分かってました。日本では出る釘は打たれるっていう言葉があるんですけれども、僕はその出てる釘だったので、すごいかなりいじめられました。笑いを取るために蹴ったりとか、殴られたりとか、小さな頃から死にたかったことっていうのはたくさんありました。
In Japan, LGBT students who try to report cases of bullying to their teachers are often faced with a refusal to engage because the teachers either don't understand sexual orientation or gender identity, or they see it as a taboo topic that they don't want to take up. Other students are told that the way they should solve the problem is to conform. They were told that their desire to be an openly gay or openly transgender student at the school was a selfish desire and was ruining the harmony of the school for everyone else. Even the National Bullying Prevention Policy promotes school harmony and social conformity instead of discussing the particular vulnerabilities of any group of students.
カムアウトしてからは以前よりももっとひどく攻撃されるようになりました。提出するノートや宿題にマジックで落書きされたり、盗んで捨てられたり、先生の中にも同性愛者に対してはっきり嫌悪感を示す先生がいるって。いじめられた時に、先生に言った時に、先生は自分たちで解決してくださいっていうものすごい関係ないみたいな、どうでもいいという態度を取られて、
同性愛は、同性愛について精神的な病気であるっていうふうなことを未だに、そう思っている、あるいはよくわからないっていう先生たちは3人に1人なんですね。なのでそういう基本的なところから知られていないので、だからこそ、まずは知識と、で認識を変えていくことと、その次ですよね、どういうふうに授業で扱うのかっていうふうなことを学ぶ研修の機会を制度として作っていくというふうなことだと思います。
小学校、決して LGBT の話など、教育などありませんでした。先生たちも授業の中でそれを使いながら悪いことを、説明してからかっている、経験、それを聞いたことがたくさんあります。
自分が信頼するいつも会う先生がもしかしたら自分に関わることかもしれないことをネガティブに悪く言うってことは、その子たちの自己肯定感を低めたり、結果として自尊感情を傷つけるような、そういうふうなことにつながっていくだと思うんですね。
For transgender students, the situation can be even worse. In order to attend school according to the gender they identify with, schools often require them to obtain a diagnosis of a mental disorder. Without this, they are forced to wear uniforms they don't identify with. They are denied access to bathrooms, and they are slotted into gender-segregated school activities.
普通の生徒は朝起きて学校楽しみだなで自分は絶対に学校に行きたくなくて、学校が終わった時にすごい幸せだった。
This year, Japan's National Bullying Prevention Act is up for review. This is a crucial opportunity for the government to address some of the weaknesses in the policy. Most specifically, they should name categories of students who are vulnerable to bullying, including LGBT students. The Japanese government has an opportunity to signal that harmony in schools should be achieved by including everyone and making everyone feel safe.
It's Friday, November 13th, 2015, in the city of Tokyo, Japan. It would be the backdrop where 38-year-old trans Japanese male Yoshi Tsuchida would reside. And when his body was discovered without a face that Friday the 13th morning, it would leave the city of Tokyo tackling for justice for years to come. Welcome, my audience. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 4, The Murder of Yoshi Tsuchida, the man with no face. It all began in its capital of Japan, the city of Tokyo. Originally a fishing village named Edo, the city became politically prominent in 1603 when it became the seat of the Tokugawa shogunate. By the mid-18th century, the 1900s, Edo was one of the most populous cities in the world with a population of over 1 million people. Now, fast forward as of 2018, there is an estimated of 38 million residents, and also the city's proper has a population of 13.99 million people. Tokyo is located at the head of Tokyo Bay, and it has the prefecture forms part of the Kanato region on the central coast of Honshu. This would be the home, especially in the Fuchsia district over near the JS Fuchsia Railroad Station. This would be the backdrop in the home for, again, our 38-year-old trans man, Yoshi Tsuchida. His home, his safe space where he was murdered, where the hateful homicide occurred, it left the city questioning its sense of safety and also the safety of its community members who identified as LGBTQ+. As you could hear in the initial audio evidence, this was actually a testimony and an interview from Yoshi as well as several other queer and trans individuals who not only navigated their journeys as youth, but then also talked about the experiences that they faced in schools, such as bullying, harassment, and even in some cases being suspended from school for simply identifying and expressing in their truth. And so what you could hear is Yoshi as well as several others, talking about their own experiences. And Yoshi kickstarted the audio off, and you could just really hear his angst and just the trauma that he endured as a trans man who began his journey as a youth back in 1994. So by the time this interview was conducted in 2014 by the Human Rights Watch, it had been 20 years at the very least since Yoshi had been in his gender journey. But what we want to do now, my audience, is discuss exactly how today's episode is going to go. We're going to not only, we've heard from Yoshi about his own experiences, but also what we want to do is hear from other individuals who have lived in Japan, especially a trans man by the name of Jesse. He talks about his identity not only in the United States, but also in Tokyo. And then we also have a very interesting video around the community of Japan, specifically not necessarily knowing the acronym for LGBT. So it's really interesting to hear how people I guess, connect with the term LGBT over in Tokyo. Some people knew what it meant, and unfortunately, a lot of people did not. So that goes to show you that we still have a lot of work to do over there in our beautiful, beautiful continent of Asia, especially our country of Japan and its capital of Tokyo. And then, of course, we're going to hear from our incredible vlogger, Raven Noah. This is my sister from the East Coast. She commented on last week's Hateful Homicide, the murder of Samuel Edmund Damien Valentine, for our episode 4 for the 4th season. So, again, she has a commentation and definitely an expert opinion on the hateful homicide of Yoshi Tsuchida. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. It all began that Friday, November 13th of 2015. It was around 5:30 a.m. when 28-year-old trans Japanese female Akira Tsuchida went into her father, 38-year-old trans Japanese male Yoshi's room. The two came back home around 1 a.m. that morning from a night out, and also from getting some items that Akira was getting ready to head to the United States to visit some extended family. And so her and Yoshi had done some shopping prior to this. They both got home around 1 a.m. and Akira wanted to go check in on her father. She stated around 2:30 a.m. she could hear a loud noise, a yell, a scream, some kind of muffle. However, she didn't get up to check because she believed that her father, who loves to watch television, sometimes at a very high volume, she thought that it was just an episode of one of his favorite TV shows. She returned to bed, and when she woke back up around 5 a.m. to get some coffee for herself and for her boyfriend, 32-year-old cisgender Japanese male Enmei Hicardo, she wanted to also see if her father wanted some coffee as well. When she went into his room, this 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment on the 2nd floor in the Fuchsia district, this western suburb residential area of Tokyo, when she knocked on the door and didn't get a response, she opened it just to pry in and see if her dad was okay and how well he was resting. But when she walked through that door, what she discovered would leave her shaken to her core. She opens the door and discovers her father, Yoshi Tsuchida, without a face. A gruesome discovery of nature that left her completely discombobulated and yelling out for help. Her partner, Enmei Hicardo, immediately got up and went into the room of Akira's father, Yoshi Tsuchida. They both saw this terrible, terrible tragedy that bestowed this incredible, handsome man who was not only an advocate for trans youth, but also who had taken in individuals and adopted them as his own. This incredible philanthropist and human rights leader ultimately was found without a face in his main bedroom apartment. However, when the 911 call or their emergency line was reached out, one of the things that Akira stated in the 911 call was that she believed her father had been mauled by his dog. When she entered the room initially to check on her father and discovered he had no face, part of that gruesome discovery was discovering that his dog was eating at his face, mauling at his face. And so this led her to believe that there was some kind of attack, which explains the 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m. yelling due to the attack of the dog. And this resulted in the vicious accidental death of her father. When Detective Kanai Doi came onto the scene, he was determined to really understand exactly what happened to this man. He was very cognizant of the fact that this was a family of the trans experience, and he was very aware of making sure that he wanted to utilize the correct pronouns and really affirm everyone's gender journey. Though there were some media reports of misgendering, One of the media reports did mention that Akira and Yoshi, prior to becoming father and daughter, potentially had a romance. And one of the things that Detective Kanaido, as he's starting to go through this investigation, right, he's not only having himself and a Tokyo law enforcement team coming through, canvassing, knocking on doors, seeing who has heard what, but he's also reaching out to his forensics team to backtrack Yoshi's phone. He's also going to reach out to the coroner, who's going to do a proper autopsy to assure if this death was accidental by a dog attack or either it was a hateful homicide. All of these things are simultaneously going on as Detective Kanaido is interviewing initially Akira Tsuchida, Yoshi's daughter, and Akira's partner, Enmei Hicardo. The two had differences of opinions when it came to the living situation between father and daughter and her partner. According to Akira, she and her father and Enmei all got along. So much so to the fact that he was the main reason why she began her gender journey, especially the medical transition portion. Yoshi, who had undergone several gender-affirming surgeries and HRT, hormone replacement therapy treatments, had in success in his own right, became the man that he so desperately wanted to represent to the world and for himself. And so he was a great mentor and support for Akira. And so much to the fact that that was one of the reasons why she was going to the United States as well, to see about getting some more affirming procedures and surgeries. Akira shared this with Detective Kanaido and wanted him to know that, she loved her father. She appreciated him. The two had known each other at this point for 7 years. She described it as lucky number 7. And from 2008 to 2015, the two had this incredible bond like no other. He officially adopted Akira in 2011, and that is when she moved into the fuchsia apartment with him. He had a second bedroom, and of course, this is his daughter. He opened his home. By 2014, when again the initial audio of the Human Rights Watch was released with Yoshi's own testimony, this is around the same time when Akira met Enmei in 2014. The two hit it off at a bar. He seemed to like her, enjoy her. They moved into her place with her father, into her bedroom, and that is where they lived for the next 1.5 years until the hateful homicide on that Friday the 13th of November 13th, 2015. Detective Kanaido then went over to Enmei and asked him his own perceptions and take of his relationship with Yoshi, as well as Yoshi's relationship with his daughter Akira. Well, according to Enmei, he and Yoshi didn't quite get along, and sometimes Akira and Yoshi didn't get along. The father and daughter would butt heads on who knew what was best, and according to Enmei, Yoshi felt that father knows best, not only from who Akira should be with, but also the necessary steps she needs to take in her medical transition. Enmei stated that this push and pull, this tug of war on the best steps, the next steps for Akira, caused so much tension and chaos between the father and daughter that by the time she was getting ready to head to the United States, specifically Arizona, for some medical procedures, this is when they had this major fallout. Of course, Detective Kanaido was shocked about this, and he went back to Akira and asked her about this potential disagreement. Well, she stated that Enmei was misunderstood, that the two had differences of opinions, but that was a typical family rift. She knew that herself as a trans woman, her journey was different than her father, who identified as a trans man, and so the two would sometimes differ on what that would look like for her. But nonetheless, she loved her father. She thanked him for the mentorship, the guidance, and support, and also for the time when she first met him in 2008. She was experiencing unhousedness, so she expressed her appreciation for him opening up his home, his heart, and his willingness to adopt her and bring her into his family. So again, now Detective Kanaido has these differences of opinions. As the Tokyo law enforcement team are going around canvassing, neighbors mentioned that they unfortunately did not hear anything between 2:30 a.m. on that Friday the 13th morning. And so one of the things that the law enforcement team was questioning was, the apartments are very closely adjacent together and the walls are thin. And so this was baffling for detectives, trying to figure out if Yoshi, who was being mauled by a dog in his apartment around 2 a.m., screaming, yelling, this would be a very brutal and painful process and attack to go through. Certainly someone must have heard something. Well, that is when Detective Kanaidoa again went back to Yoshi's daughter, Akira. She stated that, again, in her initial interview with him, which was just a few hours before, that she stated that she thought she heard a scream or a yell, but she attributed it to her father's love of television, anime, and sometimes there can be yelling and screaming, and she didn't think anything of it. And so maybe, according to her, this is what the neighbors thought as well. However, the neighbors said, and this was the neighbors who was directly adjacent to Yoshi and Akira's apartment and also across the hallway, both stated that they didn't hear anything. And one of the neighbors, particularly her boyfriend, stated that he was actually up around 2:30 and he didn't recall hearing any noise. So when Detective Kanaidoa brought this to Akira's attention, she stood by her truth. Detective Kanaidoa left Enmei and Akira to process their grief, and then also had to inform Yoshi's extended family too, including his parents, his grandparents, as well as some siblings. When they found out the devastating news that their 38-year-old son and loved one had been brutally found without a face, this left them shocked and saddened. They wanted justice for their son. They talked about how he first came out, again, back in 1994 at the age of 17. He knew as early on as his junior year of high school his truth. Always identifying on the masculine spectrum, he expressed masculine, he presented in a masculine way. He began vocal lessons to have his voice become more masculine, beginning hormone replacement therapy. Yoshi, at the time of his death in 2015, was single. He had some series of relationships throughout his very, very incredible life. But nonetheless, he was primarily focused on the advocacy work, the work around youth and inspiring and aspiring them to be better and live better. He, who had came from a life of middle class, knew all too well that unfortunately some community members, even in Tokyo, didn't still have the same access or privilege that he may have had. So paying it forward, one of the things that he wanted to do was make sure that he provided some sort of safe space for youth. So before he adopted his daughter Akira, Yoshi was known throughout the city of Tokyo, and especially in the suburb area of Fuchsia, for opening up his home to other Q, trans, BIPOC youth and young adults and young people, but he was also known for just being willing to speak up for the injustices of the youth as well as the young adults in Tokyo. He was not the only one. There were others who were inspired by Yoshi's work, and for the next 21 years, you had this incredible man who was just doing a lot of advocacy work in Tokyo. He would connect with the Human Rights Campaign of the United States as well as the Human Rights Watch, which led to him being part of this video campaign on raising awareness around bullying. However, I want to shift gears and talk about, the experiences of another trans man. His name is Jesse. Jesse, who has been in his truth for quite some time, wanted to talk about his first year of living as a trans man in Tokyo, Japan.
Exactly, since I moved to Japan, and I kind of wanted to talk about my experiences being here and living and working as a trans guy in Japan. I wanted to kind of cover like a bunch of topics about the things I went through this past year, going back and explaining everything, I guess. So like the first part is coming out. About a year ago, I arrived and nobody knew about me transitioning and stuff like that, especially my close family here. And so I was still in the closet and stuff like that, and I was really scared to come out at first when I moved here. So I sort of got the courage up, and I mean, it's like it's something you can't hide forever. So at the end of the month, I came out to my grandma because I knew that she's always been really close to us since we were living in Japan when we were younger, before we moved to the States. And I knew that she's somebody that I can talk to and be open about. So I told her and my struggles and that I used to self-harm a lot back in the States because I struggled a lot with my gender problems, and that I've always felt like a guy, and that, and I told her that, I already started hormones and everything, and she asked me about that, and I told her that I really struggled a lot through it, and I just really wanted to tell you. And so she started crying, and then she was kind of holding me, and I think she was really worried about the things I went through and stuff like that. And she was accepting right away, and I told her to start kind of telling, everybody else and stuff like that. So that kind of spread. She told, my neighbors and people that we used to know when we were younger, and surprisingly, everybody was very, very accepting. So that was really nice. They, respect me by my chosen name and stuff like that. And there's some few people that, we haven't told, but I mean, it's not like they're very close. So everybody around here pretty much knows. So that's been pretty positive coming out. And yeah, the acceptance part was really good. I mean, especially the people we used to know. And then a couple of months later, obviously I came here to find a job. So that was one thing that was kind of tough. I had a hard time like filling out my resume because at the time, this was January last year, I still didn't have my name change, so I sort of had to put my birth name, my birth gender marker. So it was really, really hard for me to move forward because I didn't get all that done. I was like, I just can't go into a job. It just was really hard for me to make that first step of, going to interviews. I went to I think I went to 2 interviews. I was going to go to a third one, but I got the second one at the dollar shop, so that was fine. So for the resume, I just put, my original information, and then, I just went whatever. Eventually, when I get used to the environment, the workplace, I can eventually come out and tell everybody about it. So because I really wanted a job, because if I didn't have a job, I would have had to go back. And the funny thing is, it's interesting because, we had a return flight on March 11th when the earthquake hit, and that's crazy because, because at the time the earthquake would have happened, we would have been in Tokyo, at the airport, and that was the day we had to go back if I didn't get a job. And I had a lot of pressure from my parents about getting a job, and I personally wanted money because I wanted to get surgery done. I need money. So I mean, just sort of the money kind of took over all these, I wanted money, so I just went into it. Just, whatever I can get is fine. And I'll worry about the other stuff later. So then I got my second job at the dollar shop, and then I did my name change. Once I got hired, I didn't tell them anything. I was hired as female, and then so I kind of. And nobody knew about it. And the interesting thing is that, I found out later that a lot of people, some people thought I was a female, some people thought I was a guy, and then they saw my birth name, so they figured, oh, that's a female, just because of my really feminine name. And then eventually, I kind of, at the interview, I lied and said that I was going to be having my name change, because sometimes people in Japan, they change their name sometimes because it might be seen as bad luck or something. Some names, like kind of have bad, bad fortune. I don't know how to explain that, but so there's some reasons people change their name, and that's like a really good reason. So I just told them that, and that I'll be changing the name, and then when I get all the information changed, that I'll show you the information so you can get it changed into the system. So then that eventually happened. A couple months went by. It started getting really, really tough hiding, my trans identity while being on testosterone, and every day I would wake up like not wanting to go. I didn't want to get up. It got really hard. Sometimes I would call in because I just couldn't go. I couldn't just pretend, while my voice was dropping, and I had to pretend like somebody that I'm not. And I would wake up like 2 hours early so I can do this stupid voice training bullcrap, and trying to get my voice higher so I can, trying to get my high voice up so they don't find out that my voice is dropping. So that was really, really tough. And then eventually we actually had the first manager we had. He was kind of like a manager for like many different stores, so he wasn't around most of the time, so he wasn't somebody that I can talk to, and he seemed like a cold person. He didn't seem very friendly. Sometimes he comes in still into our store, but he's just, I don't know, he just seems kind of cold, and I felt like I couldn't really talk to him. So then finally I found out that he was going to be, he's not going to be our manager anymore, and we're getting a new manager, so I was like, yes, that's great.
And as you could hear, he was excited about the fact that, they were getting a new manager. But you could also hear Jesse's struggle. And this video came from 11 years ago, back in circa 2011. And so by this time, he had already been in his journey for a year. And again, this would have been very similar to around the same time that Yoshi was working with trans youth, especially trans men who were coming into their journeys. And so Yoshi had worked with Jesse, just helping him navigate, right? Because you could hear Jesse's journey of being, one of coming out, disclosure, what to share, what not to share, the reasoning for wanting to be affirmed, even coming up with explanations as to why his voice is getting deeper or why he's changing his name. And these are very common things that we as trans folks, especially those who are trying to be under the radar or stealth, sometimes as it's called, because we don't want to cause any of that attention, because again, we know far often discrimination, Jesse most likely, especially around this time of circa 2010, 2011, could have and would have been most likely terminated due to disclosing. And so, of course, the way that Jesse went about their journey was absolutely necessary and pertinent, not only for economic survival, but also for their gender identity survival. And so again, Yoshi was really pivotal in helping individuals like Jesse and others who were youth and coming into their own as young adults really find their truth. You could see even still around this time in 2011. And again, Yoshi had been in his truth at this point for 17 years by the time this video came out. And it was still as challenging to be a trans man in Japan as it was for Yoshi in 1994. So I wanted to take a moment to just share with you so that you could kind of have a little bit context of the types of journeys that our trans men in Japan go through. And then really wanted to just, talk a little bit more about our incredible Yoshi. Born January 6th, 1977 to Enmei and Tsuchida, he grew up with 2 sisters and a brother. He was very close with his grandmother, Wow, and the two had an incredible relationship, very similar to how Jesse had one with his grandmother. Wow was the first person that Yoshi came out to in 1993, specifically at the age of 16. Because she was concerned for her grandson, she, initially told him to think about it a little bit more. But by 1994, I'm telling you, Yoshi said he was not staying silent anymore. He affirmed that he knew that he was not assigned female at birth and that his identity and his truth was that of a man, specifically a transgender man. Keep in mind, the terminology back in 1994 was still very nuanced. So the grandmother was still trying to process exactly what all of this meant, but nonetheless, she did support him. And then she would also go and tell her daughter, Enmei, Yoshi's mother, and then also Hao, Yoshi's father, her son-in-law. Nonetheless, he had an incredible abundance of love and support. And this would navigate him in providing that love and support to others, such as Jesse, Akira, and even Enmei. Then, of course, you have to look into his own life. Again, in 2015, Yoshi was 38. He was determined to continue to be the change he wanted to see. He was ambitious, driven. He had successfully not only went to college and received his degree in social work, but he had also started to really independently consult with a lot of our 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are focused on LGBTQIA plus community members. He began to do like a lot of consulting work with them, speaking on his own experiences, encouraging others to be affirmed in their truth, and so forth. This was his line of work. Also in 2015, prior to his hateful homicide on that Friday the 13th, around 5:30 a.m., when his body was gruesomely discovered without a face, he was also looking forward to doing some more traveling. He was also wanting to go to Mount Kilimanjaro and be one of the first trans men of Japanese ancestry to go and hike successfully. These were things that he was looking forward to, not only to conclude in the 2015 year, but also for the 2016 year. He too had planned to travel to the United States to visit some extended family and also look into some other procedures after his daughter Akira would be returning. So he had a lot of plans and preparations for his future and the future of his family when all of that was abruptly ended on Friday, November 13th, 2015 at 5:30 a.m. in the city of Tokyo, Japan, over in the Fuchsia district. Again, Detective Kanai Doi he reached out to the coroner, and the coroner said that Yoshi had been murdered, that he had been asphyxiated, and most likely drugged. There was some kind of chemical that allowed him to get put to sleep very quickly, and the coroner was still trying to determine exactly what that was, but was able to trace that this subdued Yoshi, and ultimately he would have been rendered powerless to be able to stop anything that was going on. When it came to the explanation around his dog mauling his face, the coroner explained that at the time when his body was discovered, he had already been deceased, and the pheromones and the chemicals that was coming from this drug that he had been either took or it was given to him, and most likely given to him, that the pheromones, the scent from his now his body that's now beginning to go into rigor mortis and lividity, it's releasing these chemicals, and this attracted the dog. It's almost like a pheromone, and it resulted in this mauling attack, this response that the dog would have not typically had for his owner and his friend. And so all of these things were being explained to Detective Kanai Doi, and he immediately asked his team to bring in Enmei and Akira. They both were brought down to the interrogation rooms at the Tokyo Police Department and was immediately questioned around the drugs that was in Yoshi's body, as well as the explanation around his hateful homicide being asphyxiated. Well, Akira stuck to her story. She stated that her and her father got home around 1 a.m. and that she would never hurt him. And Enmei stood by his story that, he didn't necessarily get along with Yoshi, that he thought that maybe he was an overbearing and overprotective father. And when it came to Akira, but he certainly would never do anything to hurt the man who welcomed him into his own home. Well, Detective Kanai Doi had these differences of opinions, and he still had to figure it out, and that's exactly what he continued to do. He continued to investigate and prod and looked into the forensics of Yoshi's cell phone. The reason he wanted to look into the forensics specifically around where was Yoshi's phone at the time of his hateful homicide was because he wanted to see two things. One, if Yoshi just opened the door since there was no signs of forced entry, or if Yoshi had left the home and then brought someone back, sort of kind of like a maybe like hook up or something. He went and met the person and brought him back. Nonetheless, there was no evidence of forced entry. And so again, all of these things were coming into play, and Detective Kanai Doi was determined to understand what happened. And again, Enmei and Akira stood by their truths. He ultimately had to release them and then continue to investigate. But as he continued to investigate, his head, he was scratching his head trying to figure out exactly who could have done what. The cell phone records ultimately proved that Yoshi never left home. He was there. So whomever committed this hateful homicide either was inside of the home when he was there, or either he let them into the home later after Akira and Enmei went to sleep around 1:30 that morning. And somewhere between 1:30 and 4 a.m., and this is the estimated time of death by the coroner, and by the time that Akira discovered his body at 5:30 a.m., he had been dead for at least a couple of hours, or estimated a couple of hours, again, releasing those pheromones and those chemicals that then resulted in the dog's response, biological response to want to attack. All of these things was still trying to figure out. He was trying to put these pieces together. And as he was putting these pieces together, I wanted to take a moment and have you all hear from the community of Tokyo, right? What do the people of Japan think of the term LGBTQ? This interview was done back in 2021, done by a completely random group of strangers who expressed their own opinions around the definition for the acronym of LGBTQ.
Hey guys, it's Yuta. So, there's something I need to clarify. We don't have an established Japanese term for LGBT. LGBT is an English term, and that's why not every Japanese person knows it. But that doesn't mean they've never heard of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. We just don't have a Japanese term that includes all of these people. We have terms like dōsei aisha, which means somebody who likes somebody from the same gender. But LGBT is much more inclusive, and that's why I used it in this video. Check this out!
LGBT って言葉知ってます？
はいはい知ってます。
どういう意味ですか？
それぞれのレズビアンとかゲイとかバイセクシャル T がわかんないんですけど、トランスジェンダーかなの略だと思います。
それってどういう意味を表しているかっていうか、
性的対象、好きな相手はフリーだよみたいな、ジェンダーフリーを表してるって思ってました。知らない。はい、LGBT 知ってます。
じゃあちなみに知らない方が何だと思います？
わからないです。
全くイメージが
つかないです。
なんかの略なんですか？
路地裏？路地裏。あんまりわからないけど。マジで臭いねんけど。男の人でも女の人でもどっちでも好きになれるみたいな。すげえ。
それぞれ何かの頭文字で略なんですよ。
L がレズビアン、G がジェンダーレス、T がトレンスジェンダーだと思います。
ちゃいました。
ちょっと違う。
G がバイセクシャル。LGBT って言葉知ってます？
知らないですね。中の会社とかですか？
あ、知ってます。知らない。
LGBT なんですけど、なんか略なんですよ。何だと思います？
ゲームの名前。なんとなくは知ってます。ジェンダーレスとかそんな感じのやつですよね。
LGBT って言葉知ってます？
はい、知ってます。
どういう意味を表すか？
レズビアン、ゲイ、LGBT。
And as you could hear, some of them was struggling with that definition of LGBT. Some of them did understand that the acronym stood for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and some of them thought that it was the name of a company. A couple did recognize that it was related to sexual orientation or coined it as genderless. But we did get a couple of terms on like how the community does relate to sexual orientation and gender identity. So a huge thank you for that. So then, of course, Detective Kanai Doi is now questioning everything, this case in its entirety. He circles back to the coroner, making sure that the manner of death was that of a homicide. The coroner confirmed again. Now, what was ultimately determined, who committed the hateful homicide of Yoshi Tsuchida on Friday, November 13th, 2015, and when his body was discovered at 5:30 a.m. Who committed this hateful homicide is either a random stranger, his daughter Akira, or her partner Enmei, or either both. As Detective Kanai-doi continued to investigate, poke and prod, he was really left at a standstill. There was no direct evidence linking Yoshi's daughter or Yoshi's partner to the hateful homicide. This left Yoshi's family questioning everything. Could their granddaughter, could their great-granddaughter be part of this conspiracy to silence Yoshi? And could the reason be because of a difference of opinions on how to proceed with their medical transitions? These were the questions that Yoshi's family had as well. They didn't want to believe that their precious Akira, who they had known as well for 7 years, lucky number 7 as Akira coined it, they didn't want to believe that truth. And they certainly didn't want to believe that her partner for a year and a half, Enmei Hicardo, could be responsible as well. Yoshi loved them. He took them into his home. He gave them a place to stay. And this was something that really meant a lot to him. He adopted Akira. He considered her his daughter. She was his daughter for all legal and family intensive purposes. So the idea of something like this, where familicide, right, patricide, where a daughter is going to commit a hateful homicide against her father and both identify as trans, this was truly groundbreaking, and it made the case go global. There was a lot of speculations and debates on whether, again, if it was just the dog or if it was an overdose, accidental. But again, that coroner affirmed that he had died due to asphyxiation and also being drugged with this drug that would have left him powerless and renderless. Because there was no proof as to when he took the drug and who gave it to him, right? Because Akira stated that they had came back from a night out, shopping, etc. Could he have drunken something and someone gave him something at a bar? Again, all of these questions were still plaguing not only Detective Kanai Doi, but also the family of Yoshi Tsuchida. Akira would later move from the 2-bedroom home. The home was covered with a tarp to really cover and really provide and protect the integrity of the scene. She and Enmei would move out of the apartment by the end of 2015, and ultimately as of 2022, the two are still residing in Tokyo and reside together. They have not been charged with the hateful homicide of Yoshi Tsuchida, and his case and his hateful homicide still remains unsolved to this day. Detective Kanai Doi stated in an interview that when more evidence points to the people that he firmly believes is truly guilty for this hateful homicide, he will then vigorously pursue these people and provide justice by making sure that he throws the book at them to the fullest extent of the law. As we prepare to conclude this case, I want you to just take a moment and hear from my incredible vlogger, Raven Noah. She always just provides just such great intake. She too is an incredible Black trans woman from the East Coast. I love her, I support her, and I always want to make sure that her voice is valued in spaces like this. So please take a moment and listen to Raven Noah as we come back and prepare to wrap up.
Okay, now the person's name is a trans man. His name is Yoshi, or Yoshi, 38 years old. Now, this is a trans man right here. Okay, now, I'm gonna call him Yoshi. I was gonna say Yoshi, but she is S-H-E, so it's Yoshi, S-H-I. Okay, forgive me, I'm butchering the name. I'm doing the best I can do. Anyway, I just felt as though the story needs to be brought out because I don't feel as though no one is really talking about it, and I just happened to Google something and I saw it come up. So I wanted to let people know, of all genders, when it comes down to transgenders, trans men, we're all within the same circle when it comes down to the LGBT, but for some reason, to me per se, the trans man and the transgender women are more like family. Not saying we're all not family, but we're more closer on that schedule of the transitioning stage, so we kind of understand each other's struggle the best way we can. Anyway, the man said, so I'm going to say Yoshi, 38 years old, had his face sliced off with a knife. Now, they're not sure if it was a knife or some type of sharp object, but this is the thing. The person who came home was 28-year-old transgender. Now, they didn't give out the name, so the transgender came home, this is what was said, came home, went inside the room, they went out, came home, went inside the room, went to sleep, got back up, went into the room to go check on. Now, Yoshi had adopted the transgender. Now, in Tokyo, it is not unnormal for an adult to be adopted by someone, which is, it's not uncommon in Japan. So, the two had, they were, it's the father and the daughter, taking care. And Yoshi lived in West suburban area house. Now, this is a picture of Yoshi's house. So this is the thing. The daughter had came home and found out that her father was inside the bed still sleeping, went into the room to go check up on her. This is allegedly, it's the internet, so allegedly went into the room to go check up on her father and found that his face was in some type of plastic, and his body was covered up, in a blanket. So what happened was, he was murdered. And the thing about it is that the transgender woman, they said that was like 2 hours after the transgender woman came home and found out that, her father was inside the bed dead. Now, the problem that we have here with this case is that, they said the father was in a faceless, covered inside of it. So whoever did the person butchered her face up, just cut it off her face. And the investigation is still going on in Tokyo. The Metropolitan spokesperson told them. Now, this is the thing. Of course, when there is a murder, they're going to say, this is how it goes, don't blame me. But when, if me and you was inside the house together and I get murdered, you're going to be the person of interest because you was the only one there that was in the house with me. And if it's not any breaking and entering, then there has to be someone who was in the thing. Now, I don't know if it was breaking and entering. It was not reported. However, they're stating that the transgender woman and the trans man, used to have a lot of fights inside the house, allegedly. Now, it was a lot of emergency phone calls that were called from there, reporting there were loud voices of two people fighting. It's up underneath the investigation. So, now the thing about it is that the transgender woman found her father inside of the dead, and this allegedly, the thing about it is that she's got to prove herself innocent, or both these points towards her.
All things points towards her. Again, we are not pointing any blame towards Akira Tsuchida or Enmei Hicardo. But like Raven Noah said, this case needs to be covered. There's a lot of misconstrued and contradictory evidence from both accounts, whether it's from Akira or her partner, but nonetheless, they both have still been proven not guilty of this hateful homicide, and it still remains unsolved to this day, even going into almost 8 years later. So please, my audience, if you know of anything, if you hear of anything, please feel free to reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, social media. I will make sure that I get this information over. Detective Kanaido is still an active investigator on this case, and so I will definitely make sure that he gets this information as well. As we prepare to conclude, I just want to say to our incredible, incredible brother and just handsome, vibrant, outgoing, positive, mentor, leader, father, son, brother, Yoshi Tsuchida, born January 6th, 1977, and resting on since November 13th of 2015. We remember you yesterday, today, tomorrow, forever, and always. Thank you all so much, my audience, for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 4 of A Hateful Homicide. My name is Mallory Jenna Robinson, your host. You can follow me at MalloryJenna90 on Instagram. Please follow us on Instagram at A Hateful Homicide. You can also like us on Facebook at A Hateful Homicide. Check out our website at ahatefulhomicide.net. And then please feel free to share and continue to make sure that our victims get the voices that they deserve. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.